Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast that looks at the human side of financial planning. I'm Oliver Wickham. I'm the Partnership Director for St James's Place, Asia and Middle East, and I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Jamie Warner, one of our senior partners at St James's Place, who's specialised in helping expats here in Hong Kong for at least the last decade. Now, Jamie, we're going to be talking today about that big question for expats. Do I stay or do I go? At some point, they make the decision to leave. And we're going to be talking about all of the key decisions and the things that they need to be thinking about when making that big decision. Before we get there, though, Jamie, perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to Hong Kong and why did you decide to specialise in helping expats with their financial planning?
Sure thing. Thanks, Ollie. So I moved out to Hong Kong in 2013, having been living in London for a few years. Graduated Bristol in 2010, off to London, and I thought, well, I want to go out and have an adventure, move somewhere where there's a lot of opportunity to grow career-wise. Came out here a single man, and then not that long after I met my wife here, so about 18 months after being here. And then we have moved from Central out to Pok Fu Lam. Got 2 kids now, and I've just really enjoyed the last. It's actually been 12 years in Hong Kong in total. So
excellent. And that whole time you've been financial planning?
Financial planning since the very beginning. So I moved out here and I joined a company which was acquired by St James's Place. And what that meant for us as advisors in Hong Kong was it was like a big breath of fresh air to Hong Kong, because suddenly Hong Kong had UK standard financial advice, which most of our clients here are desperately crying out for. So high standard advice, good quality advice. So I feel very fortunate to have been at the right time to then be able to go out and offer the right level of advice to individuals out in Asia.
Brilliant. So who are your typical clients, Jamie? Who's it that you work with and help the most?
So most of my clients are, I'd say 60% Brits, 30% Australians, 10% other. And that would be majority Europeans or Kiwis or sometimes people from South America. Of those clients, the majority of them work in the banking sector, so financial services. A lot of lawyers out here that I look after. A lot of individuals who might work for the Big Four, so EYs of the world, as well as a lot of entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So generally our focus as a business and as advisors is looking after what we call the mass affluent. So the mass affluent would be individuals who are either high net worth individuals now or actually looking to build up their assets to become high net worth individuals in the future. So, I have some clients who are just starting out, but they're earning well. And I have other clients who have already made their wealth, who are looking for how best they can structure that wealth, protect it and help it grow consistently over time. But that's our core focus.
And as an expat myself, I know that I've been offshore for about 20 years, and most other expats that I meet, everybody moves offshore for 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And of course, some of them will genuinely stay 2 to 3 years, but many like me are still here 20 years later.
Yeah.
In your experience throughout the journey of these clients that you're working with, what are some of the biggest challenges that they're coming across?
So the interesting thing about expats living out here is that they generally come out here with a bit of an adventurous spirit, right? So if you're living in the UK, you're living in Australia or somewhere in Europe, and you go, right, what's my next challenge? Usually if it's someone who isn't married or they're single and they say, I can move out there easy because I don't have other considerations really when it comes to kids. So that's one part of it. Then you've got couples who move out here who are both in the same country. And they might be both in the same country, but they have different views as to how long they want to stay overseas for. So one might really miss their family, and the other one saying, life here is great. Why would we move back now? Yeah. Then you've got another dilemma where you've got an individual whose family might be in England, their spouse's family are in Australia. They want to go back home, or actually Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai is actually a nice place in the middle.
Okay.
Then as time goes by out here, of course, sometimes Hong Kong or Singapore, wherever individuals stay, this becomes their home, really. After they've been here for 3, 5, 10 years or more, You say, well, is going back to the UK or Europe or Australia home now, or because our family are here, we've got our kids here, they're at school here, we've been here for so long, is this home? Then you have these natural feelings as time goes by out here, where your parents maybe getting older, and you feel a bit of a draw to go back and look after them, or be close to them. Sometimes people really miss their siblings, so they say, I really miss my brother or my sister, I want to go back. But I find that as time goes by, as you say, individuals often come out with that view. It'll be a 2 or 3 year period. We'll enjoy it. We'll maximize the experience. We'll try and save some money. But we'll go back. And more as time goes by, we often find that 2 to 3 years becomes 3 to 5, then it becomes 5 to 8, and then often 10 years plus.
So what would you say are the key trigger points? You mentioned a couple of things there, because you mentioned coming to Hong Kong as a single guy yourself, met your wife, got married, had children.
Yeah.
Children's education is clearly a big milestone to plan for.
Yeah.
Is that something that people talk about? Does that take people away and back home?
I think that the schooling system in Hong Kong, and I think it's the same in Singapore and Dubai, is that the international schools generally meet the criteria for expat couples who feel that they want to have their children educated in a Western style, in a sort of school format, an international private school format, which they might be used to from back home. Having said that, sometimes individuals say, I really want my kids to go to the same school that I went to, or it must be a boarding school, or it must be in this neighborhood. And so I think quite often when people come out here, they have that initial view that that's what they want. And they say, we will be out there until our child reaches secondary school age, at which point we'll go back where they can be educated in England or Australia. And sometimes that's really important to them. That can be a really strong pull for someone to go back. What I found, though, is as time goes by and they realize that the schooling system here is actually very good, and their kids are being educated in the way that they feel comfortable, and their creative thinking, they're being challenged, they're bringing home homework, becoming confident individuals. And because the lifestyle can be so good, that pull to go back to living in the UK, just primarily for the kids' schooling, becomes less important because they know the education system here is pretty good.
And is cost much of a factor? International schools are not cheap.
Well, if you look at the cost of international schooling out here, might range from primary school, sort of in sterling terms, about £1,300 a month to £2,500 a month. That's actually not much more than an average private school in the UK. So that, and now you've got to factor in VAT on top of that, etc. in the UK. So the cost of schooling, I don't think, is a major impact or a major driver for why someone would go back or stay, because it's actually similar, could even be slightly less here.
Okay.
Having said that, when you get to secondary school, it does go up a bit. But if you're planning on sending your kids to private school in the UK or Australia, then you're not going to be paying huge amounts more in Hong Kong. It'll probably be there or thereabouts.
Okay.
In terms of that dilemma of whether to go back, driven by schooling, that's one part of it, kids' education. Quite often now, individuals are finding that, okay, I'm happy with the primary and secondary school route. The schools out here are strong, but they might want their kids to eventually go to university elsewhere. So now a lot of clients say, I'm very happy for my kids to be educated out here. And then they'll probably go to university in Australia, UK, US, Canada, wherever it may be. And then they'll get their sort of real world experiences, because I think one of the worries that people have here, because Hong Kong's so safe.
Yeah.
And so is Singapore. I understand Dubai as well. But because it's so safe out here, they worry that are their kids going to be okay in those other regions, which I think is why they push for them to go to university elsewhere and get that experience.
Okay, so if we're looking at the main reasons that people could eventually move home, it sounds like family is clearly a key consideration. You mentioned earlier on whether they just miss family or siblings, parents, anything else. It could be health. You mentioned with family as well, or their own health. Career opportunities sound like
Yeah.
they also play a part, and I suppose retirement. Is that a big conversation that you have with
Yeah.
people?
So on the missing family and parents getting older, um, one of the things that personally I found that sort of satisfies my sort of need to go back and see the family and want to go back and see the family is that I'm only ever a nighttime flight away from seeing it. If I wanted to
Mm,
today book a flight to the UK at 11 p.m., I could fall asleep and wake up and I'll be there 6 a.m. tomorrow. And I could be in Winchester with my family by
yeah,
9 a.m. tomorrow. It's very easy.
yeah.
And you can do that. It doesn't cost that much.
Mhm.
You can do that anytime. And I think if I was living in London, I was living in another major city, um, how often would I see my siblings and my
Mm,
parents in the flesh? Maybe I mean I might go back and see them 2 or 3 times a year,
yeah.
and that might be just a couple times less than I would see them otherwise in
Mm,
person. And then we catch up every week anyway. When it comes to career moves, often individuals say they're working for a bank or a law firm in London, and they've got a number of people above them in positions that they want to. Often moving out to Hong Kong because it's or Singapore because there's generally less individuals out here fighting for the same roles. They might find that there's more opportunity to progress
mm,
their career faster. Having said that, if you're working for a big bank and your role gets moved elsewhere, sometimes their hands are tied and they just need to go
yeah.
where that. And if they say, well, I don't want to move with my company back to London or to New York or wherever they're sending me, one of the considerations is, do I need language skills in Hong Kong now? A
Mm,
lot of my close friendship group are in recruitment out here, and more that the language skills are
mm,
becoming more important. Um, and then, yeah, other drivers are, I mean, financially, of course, we have to, and we'll
yeah.
get onto it in a minute. We have to discuss whether, okay, moving back to the UK with your role with your company, but are you on a net basis going to be much worse off or not? Are they going to equalize it? More often than not, it's just a hit that you have to take.
The tax
Yeah.
challenge.
The tax challenge, and I think we'll get into it in a minute, but that is something which we need to carefully work on with our clients to understand how that will look.
So whether it's family driven, education driven, career and opportunity driven, or retirement, when somebody comes and talks to you, one of your clients, what role do you have in supporting them with that decision as they go through the
So,
process?
so whenever we sit down with clients at the start or prospective clients at the start, it really is a opportunity for both of us just to have an open discussion about plans that they have in the short term, plans in the medium term, plans in the long term.
Mm,
What are the different scenarios that might play out? So, of course, expats often find themselves in a position where they have no idea where they're going to go next.
mm,
They know they want to retire at some point. They know that they're in a position to save good money whilst they're out here. They know that it's really tax efficient here.
mm.
But they say, we might go back to Australia. We might stay here for some time. We might go to Singapore, might go to Australia, or we might go somewhere else completely.
Yeah.
So that discussion that we have at the start just has to bring everything like that to the surface. And of course, if I'm doing my job well, then that fact-finding part where we're just really having an open discussion with each other about plans for the future, I need to be an expert listener. I need to understand exactly what might happen in the future. And by understanding that really well, I can then help guide them to making good decisions. That's my role.
It's a discovery process, isn't it, for you to understand what's
Yeah.
really important to them by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And do you think it's the numbers or how they're feeling that's the biggest driver in making that decision in the end?
Yeah. So the best advisors in what I do are usually the people who are the best at listening. Right. So they're able to sit there, act as a soundboard for clients, really get into the depths of how they're feeling about certain scenarios, and using our experience
Mm.
to understand and help them understand what would be the consequences of going down this route, this route, this route. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? The numbers are certainly important and
Mm.
but in reality, they form a relatively small part of it. So, for instance, someone says, Jamie, I might go back to UK, you live in Australia, or stay here for a long time. There's three quite different scenarios there. We would then take a view of going, okay, what are your assets? How are they positioned? What's the risk profile of them? Are they tax efficient now? Yes or no? We then say, okay, what do you want to do in the medium term or short term? Is there anything that you need to save capital for or have it ready for? And then retirement. And it's interesting when people look at their planning, quite often they look at it in a chronological order. So they go, okay, well, I'm buying a house in 2 years, so that needs to come first.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to have kids later, or I've had kids, I've got to pay for uni, and then retirement. But the thing is, the retirement pool that you need is much bigger than the other pot. So yeah, the maths part of that is something we work on with regards to retirement modeling, understanding current assets, mathematically, what do you need to do in order to retire at that date with that amount of income? But that calculation and that process is, okay, now we know what we need to do. Let's work together on how it is you get there. Yeah. But because there's different scenarios of where you might end up, we need to make sure that we've got as many strings to your bow covered as possible. And interestingly, when I first meet with prospective clients or I'm sitting down with existing clients, quite often the first thing they want to do when you're coming for a meeting about financial planning is talk about their investing. Yeah. But actually, if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and you've got a family that you know you need to provide for the next 20 years, and then you need to have enough in your pot to retire. Well, if anything happens to you within those first 20 years and there isn't the pot there yet, what happens to the family? So whilst there's often this urge to go, I want to talk about investing my money and building up assets, I need to sometimes say, well, that is absolutely important, but we need to make sure there's an umbrella over that when it comes to protecting the family. And then we need to take a view of, okay, what does that period of time look like until you are at that point where you no longer need? So you might be looking at family protection, critical illness cover. Then sometimes people might say, well, we're not sure what's going to happen, so we need to have cash ready to go. So we focus on that. But then really, once we've got the basics in place in terms of family protection, it's about how are we going to build up that pot in a tax efficient way.
So it really is way beyond the numbers. It's not just about the numbers or the investments. It's about having a really long-term plan that you can make bulletproof to give your clients the peace of mind that they're on a journey and you're going to help them get there and you're working together.
Yeah, especially when it comes to tax planning, because UK tax is quite a deep topic.
My next question was going to be actually, what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they come to the point of making the decision to go back?
Yeah.
When they engage with you, what are some of the biggest mistakes that they make? I suspect tax is probably one of them.
Yeah, tax is probably up there. I mean, okay, classic example would be somebody's living out in Hong Kong and they've got a stock portfolio, which they maybe had when they were in the UK or Australia. They have been building up other investments, and say they didn't speak to a financial advisor about what to do before they go back. Very often, we would be suggesting, particularly for Brits, that they do what's called washing out the gain. So you sell investments tax-free as a Hong Kong tax resident, and then you can reinvest those straight away. But all of the gain that's been accumulated whilst you are out overseas is just completely tax-free. And then you get yourself into a position where you can effectively step up your investments in terms of it being, all that gain being history, effectively. Okay. So in the scenario of biggest mistake, someone who doesn't know that, so they've got £1 million in some stocks of which half is gain, and they go back to the UK specifically on this one with that gain, and then they decide to sell it after they've become a UK tax resident again, they're going to be subject to tax on that whole £500,000 gain. Whereas they could be subject to zero tax on that if they had just met with a financial advisor who, and if they didn't know already, who could tell them that.
So you're talking about a saving of hundreds of £1,000s.
Absolutely. And this happens all the time. So part of what we do is we help clients build investments with us. But because the picture is much wider than just what we're looking after, we need to understand all the different aspects of what they got and how that's likely to be treated later.
And how much notice do you really need? I mean, if somebody comes to you today and says, I'm moving back to the UK next week,
Yeah.
is there enough time for you to help them?
Yes, but it should be done at least 6 months before.
Okay.
6 months before, and it gives us in just about enough time, probably, to get everything that we need. But when I'm working with my clients or meeting prospective clients, I will absolutely say, you need to tell me as soon as you can when you know that there might be a change in your circumstance, because, as you say, it can be the difference in significant.
So would you say that's the single biggest mistake that people make, is not taking advice before they go back, and ultimately they can end up with some significant tax challenges that just could have been avoided?
Yep, just with some basic asset structuring. One other mistake I'd say is, people coming out here and not making the most of being out here in a low tax environment where they can actually fast forward their retirement by probably 5 or 10 years if they're sensible when they're out here. So if you spend 5 years out here, you've probably fast forwarded retirement potentially by, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, depending on how well you save. And then if they haven't done that and they suddenly go back to an environment where they're paying 20, 30, 40, 45% tax on their income, it's very difficult to save.
Yeah. If somebody's about to go back then, and just bring it back to sort of some practical considerations for people to take away from this for our listeners, have you got any practical considerations that you suggest people should absolutely go through sort of step by step?
Yeah, so in Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, there's no capital gains tax on financial markets investments. So whenever we sit down with clients, we absolutely make sure they're aware of this. And we'll say, right, you've got a good opportunity here now to really build up assets. But we know you might go here or here or here later. So we're going to structure the investments so that they start accruing tax benefits early. But then it might be that's one part of it. Yes, we need to invest money and we need to maximize what we save and build up over time out here. And quite often that can come from just individuals actually not realizing that they don't need a few $100,000 or pounds ready to go to invest. They might just be building up assets, but earning well, but able to build up assets. Then we look at the retirement modeling. That's a crucial part of it, because you can reverse engineer what they need to do. We mix that together with where they're going to end up to make sure it's all tax efficient. But then there's another level to it, of course. I've talked about the protection part, but the other level to it is intergenerational planning. So, a lot of my clients, in fact, over the last 2 or 3 years, 5 or 6 of my clients have retired. Some have gone to Australia, some have gone to Spain, some are in Hong Kong. And at that point, and sometimes before, intergenerational planning becomes really crucial. And what I mean by that is making sure that you've got the right structure in place to make sure that assets are passed between generations tax efficiently. And quite often, if someone's accumulated a wealth of 5 or 10 million US dollars, they want to make sure that that money stays in the family bloodline. Because unless they do the right planning, there's chances that if their children were to inherit the money, then their child ends up divorcing somebody, then the person they've divorced might have a claim to 50% of the money, which the parents accumulated originally, which is powerful. Yeah.
We're obviously talking about this as well in the context of people repatriating or going home. So just, I guess, so it's clear for our listeners, what we're saying is there could be opportunities before they go back. I'm guessing you're talking particularly if somebody's perhaps got a non-domiciled spouse or a spouse that's not from the UK in this example, where they could be moving assets across, to planning all of that intergenerational wealth transfer in advance.
Yeah,
so
right? Exactly. So you've got the new rules. So domicile rule in the UK was scrapped last year, gone. And what that means is for individuals who maybe were brought up in the UK, British passports, or lived in the UK for a long time, after they've been outside of the UK for 10 full tax years, they're classed as a non-long-term resident when it comes to UK. Non-long-term residents now only have assets accessible to inheritance tax, which are UK cited, which means they live in the UK.
Yeah.
So it might be UK property, UK pensions from April 2027. UK cash, UK stocks, UK funds. If somebody who has got inheritance tax concerns and has been outside the UK for more than 10 years, but they own £5 million worth of UK property, all of that UK property is subject to inheritance tax in the UK, over and above their nil rate band of £325,000 per spouse, or 650k. All of that subject to 40% inheritance tax. If they're outside of the UK and they're looking at repatriating at some point in the future, they've got a really they've got a window, the 10-year tail provision after they go back, where those assets can actually be moved outside of their estate without having to wait for 7 years for it to do so.
Right, so there's some real planning opportunities.
Yeah, and that's something which it's a delicate topic because it requires careful thought and careful tax planning, but these decisions can save their future generations.
Yeah, sounds huge.
Significant tax, yeah.
Have you got some, I'm conscious of the time, so we'll wrap up the podcast soon, but have you got any examples of sort of real life examples where you feel you've really helped clients or they've benefited from coming and speaking to you early before they've gone back?
Yeah, so one particular client scenario comes to mind, which would be a long-term client of mine I've been working with for 5 or 6 years, introduced me to their friend, and their friend introduced me to their friend.
Okay.
I sat down with them, and between 35 and 45, couple, kids, and we were really able to help them, which is the core basic planning.
Yeah.
And then during the meeting, my client said to me, my parents could really use your help. I don't think they've done much planning.
Okay.
So then we arranged a meeting with my new client and his parents. And it so happens that there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done in order to make sure that their assets are tax efficient, because the parents, high net worth individuals, are in Hong Kong now, have been here for 30 years. They might go to the UK. They might go to Australia later.
Oh, wow.
But they're high net worth individuals, and they have significant UK situs assets, so UK property. Part of our planning is that they're saying, well, Jamie, how do we make this asset base tax efficient? And there's just been some really neat, fulfilling planning which we've been able to do, which has been saying, well, okay, you've been outside of the UK for more than 10 years, which means your UK situs assets, total about £6 million, are all subject to UK inheritance tax right now. They could be subject to zero, so about tax bill of about £2 million for the kids, which the kids would have to pay later, not them. The kids would have to find that money later. So, well, those assets should be moved. Since you're unlikely to go back to the UK, it's most likely to be Australia. Those assets should move out of the UK and moved offshore, because then the kids have got zero IHT to pay on it, because you're non-long-term residents of the UK. But then we've got to think about, well, where you're going to end up in the future, because the parents are most likely to go to Australia. And so by establishing specific investments, which are going to make sure their investments are completely tax-free later in Australia after 10 years, they'll be completely tax-free in Hong Kong. The kids haven't got a £2 million inheritance tax bill to look after. So we've, just by doing some core basic planning, left the parents and the future generations in an incredible position, save millions of pounds. And these clients are just such a pleasure to work with as well. So that's probably been my, just one of the reasons why I really like what I do and looking after people who are based out here, because it can be sometimes small things which can make a huge difference.
Sam, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll wrap things up in a moment. Before we do, is there any other one single nugget or anything you'd like to share with our listeners that you think could be valuable for them?
I would say, if you're unsure about whether you need advice and whether it would be useful to you, make sure that you are speaking to somebody who comes recommended or comes from a reputable business, where you know the level of advice that you're going to receive is of the right standard. I'd say that's crucial, because I think a lot of the time people say, well, I don't need advice, I can just do things myself. It might be true if you're just investing some money yourself, but actually individuals who seek professional advice usually it is incredibly useful, and they're surprised at how much they can learn and how they can improve their asset base. Yeah.
Okay, Jamie. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. If there's one final tip
Yeah.
that you could give, if there was just one tip that you could give to any of our listeners about if they're going to be potentially thinking about going home, what would it be?
Take advice. Just speak to someone who comes recommended from a reputable business, as you'll probably find that it's incredibly useful.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. So it sounds like your top tip is take advice, make sure you get it from reputable people. And that's probably some of my key takeaways from today. I think this is about financial planning can be incredibly complex, particularly when you're crossing borders. So it's really important to plan early and make sure that you've got an overarching plan in place that's really going to give you peace of mind. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to the podcast today, Beyond the Numbers. If you found it useful, if you know anybody else that could be returning to their home country at some point, or perhaps just crossing a border somewhere else, please do share this podcast. If you'd like to find out more about St James's Place, how we can help you, how Jamie can help you, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.